The explosion that destroyed Nexus Prime sent shockwaves through space and time that changed everything in the galaxy. Captain Minho Park watched from the bridge of the dying Iron Dragon as the massive station collapsed into itself and disappeared, in a flash of light brighter than a star. The quantum cascade reaction had worked beyond their wildest hopes, but the price was higher than anyone had imagined. "Hull breach on decks 7 through 12, reported Hunwoo Kim, as emergency lights flashed throughout the ship. "The quantum matrix overload damaged our main structural supports. We have maybe 10 minutes before complete system failure." Minho looked around at his crew and saw that they understood what was happening. The Iron Dragon was dying, and there was no way to save her. But their sacrifice had accomplished something that no one thought possible. The Vorthak Empire had been cut off from its central command, and billions of enslaved beings across the galaxy suddenly had a chance for freedom. "All hands to escape pods," Minho ordered. "We have done what we came to do," but his crew refused to leave their stations. Communications Officer Soyeon Park continued broadcasting intelligence data to rebel forces, while Ji-won Choi coordinated with resistance movements on dozens of worlds. They knew that every extra minute of transmission time could save millions of lives. "Sir, the Steel Tiger and Shadow Wolf are also taking critical damage," reported Tactical Officer Young-ho Kim. "But the Storm Raven is still operational and requesting permission to evacuate survivors." Minho made his final command decision. "Tell Captain Minsuk Jo to get as far away as possible and carry word of what happened here to Earth. Someone needs to tell our people that we succeeded." The Storm Raven was the only Starbreak ship to escape the destruction of Nexus Prime. Captain Minseok Jo watched in silence as his sister ships were consumed by secondary explosions from the quantum weapons overload. 12 of the finest vessels humanity had ever built were reduced to scattered atoms, but their crews had saved the galaxy. Across the Vorthak Empire, the loss of Central Command caused immediate chaos. Fleet commanders who had spent their entire careers following orders from Nexus Prime suddenly found themselves cut off and isolated. Some tried to continue their missions, but without coordination, their efforts became confused and ineffective. On the prison world of Kepler-7, the Vorthak guards received no response when they called for reinforcements to deal with a massive slave uprising. The Zalari prisoners had used their natural swimming abilities to flood the underground mines, while the Korvan workers had organized into military formations using tactics they remembered from before their enslavement. Dai-Ho Lim arrived at Kepler-7 with a small fleet of smuggler ships just as the rebellion reached its peak. He had been coordinating with other free traders throughout the galaxy to provide weapons and supplies to anyone willing to fight the Vorthak. The sight that greeted him was beautiful and terrible. "Thousands of prisoners are breaking free," he reported to his contacts. "The guards cannot control them without support from their fleet." Similar uprisings were happening on hundreds of worlds as news of Nexus Prime's destruction spread faster than light through the galaxy's underground networks. Species that had been enslaved for centuries suddenly remembered what freedom felt like, and they were willing to die to get it back. On Earth, the effects were immediate and dramatic. Admiral Thexmore's massive fleet began receiving contradictory orders from different Vorthak commanders who were trying to take control of the situation. Some ships were ordered to retreat, while others were told to continue the bombardment. The confusion allowed General Naeon Kang's defenders to strike back with devastating effectiveness. "Their formation is breaking apart," Naeon observed from her command bunker as human fighters attacked the disorganized Vorthak fleet. Without central coordination, they cannot maintain their battle lines. The Earth Defense Fleet had been reduced to less than 20 ships, but they fought with renewed fury against an enemy that no longer seemed invincible. Captain Hyunsok Park led a desperate attack against the Void Crusher itself, using converted cargo haulers as torpedo boats. His ship was destroyed in the assault, but the damage he caused convinced Admiral Thexmore that the battle was lost. On the surface, Tai Hyung Yang's resistance fighters had turned the tide against the Vorthak ground forces. The alien soldiers were trained to follow orders without question, but now they received no orders at all. Many units simply stopped fighting and tried to return to their landing zones for evacuation. "They are retreating from the government district," reported Minseo Park as she watched Vorthak Walker tanks pulling back from their positions. "I cannot believe we actually won." Tae-hyung felt the same disbelief, but he had learned not to trust easy victories. "Keep hitting them until they are off our planet completely," he ordered his fighters. "This is not over until the last alien ship leaves Earth orbit." Prime Minister Subin Lee emerged from her bunker for the first time in days and walked through the ruins of New Geneva. The city had been badly damaged by orbital bombardment, but it was still standing and its people were still free. When she looked up at the sky, she could see Vorthak ships fleeing toward the edge of the solar system. "Broadcast a message to all human colonies," she told her communications staff. "Tell them that Earth is free and the Vorthak Empire has fallen." Thus, the news spread through human space like wildfire. On Mars, the agricultural domes erupted in celebration, while on Titan, the mining platforms shut down operations so workers could watch the enemy retreat. For the first time in 150 years, humans could look at the stars without fear, but the cost of victory had been enormous. The entire Starbreak fleet, except for one ship, had been destroyed, and thousands of brave defenders had died in the final battle. Captain Minho Park and his crew were among the heroes who would never see the freedom they had died to achieve. When the Storm Raven finally reached Earth 3 days later, Captain Min Seok Jo brought with him detailed recordings of the battle at Nexus Prime. The technical data would help human scientists understand what had happened and perhaps build new weapons for the future. But more importantly, he carried the names and final messages of the crews who had sacrificed everything. Soyeon Park had recorded a message for her family before the Iron Dragon's final battle. "Tell my children that their mother helped break the chains that bound humanity," her voice said through the static. "We may not have lived to see freedom, but we made it possible for others." The aftermath of the Vorthak Empire's collapse was chaotic and often violent. Many alien worlds declared independence, while others fell into civil war as different factions fought for control. The galaxy would need years or decades to establish a new order, but the age of oppression was finally over. General Nyon Kang was promoted to head the new Galactic Liberation Council that worked to coordinate aid for former slave worlds. Her first priority was establishing communication networks to replace the destroyed Vorthak command system. The free species needed to work together to prevent another empire from rising to take the Vorthak's place. Daiho Lim became one of the most important figures in post-war reconstruction as his smuggling network evolved into a legitimate trade organization. He had spent years moving weapons and supplies to resistance movements, and now he used those same routes to deliver food and medicine to liberated worlds. Jiwon Choi survived the destruction of the Iron Dragon and returned to Earth as one of the most decorated heroes in human history. But she refused all honors and medals, preferring to work quietly with other former prisoners to help them adjust to life in a free galaxy. The scars on her arms would always remind her of what they had suffered, but they also proved that the human spirit could not be broken. Hyunwoo Kim's body was never found, but his technical innovations lived on in the new generation of human ships being built in orbital yards around Earth. The quantum phase technology was too unstable for regular use, but the other advances from Project Starbreak revolutionized human space travel and made them equals to any species in the galaxy. Tae-hyung Yang was elected mayor of New Seoul and spent his time rebuilding the city that had been damaged in the war. He often walked through the Memorial Plaza where his resistance fighters had made their final stand and remembered the friends who had not lived to see victory. 1 year after the destruction of Nexus Prime, Prime Minister Subin Lee stood before a gathering of representatives from 50 different worlds and read the names of every crew member who had died aboard the Starbreak ships. The ceremony lasted for hours, but no one left because they understood that these heroes had given them something more precious than life itself. They had given them freedom. The memorial wall that was built in New Geneva contained the names of Captain Minho Park and all his brave crew members who had sailed into the heart of enemy territory, knowing they would never return. Below their names was inscribed a simple message that became the motto of the new Galactic Alliance. They shattered the darkness so that others might see the light. The day humanity shattered galactic dominance became the day the galaxy learned that no empire lasts forever and no people can be kept in chains if they are willing to fight for their freedom. Taemin sat in the massive council chamber aboard Harmony's Rest and felt very small. The space station was bigger than most cities back on Earth, but right now it felt like a prison. Around him sat representatives from 12 different alien species, and every single one of them looked terrified. The emergency session had been called 3 days ago when the deep space monitors picked up something that made the entire Galactic Council panic. Taemin had never seen aliens panic before. These beings had traveled between stars for thousands of years, while humans were still learning to make fire. If they were scared, then whatever was coming must be truly horrible. Ji-won leaned over from the seat next to him and whispered in Korean. She was the best xenobiologist humanity had, and her job was to study alien life forms. Right now, she was studying the intercepted communications that had started this whole mess. Her hands shook as she held the data pad. "The translations are getting clearer," she said quietly. "They call them the Void Hunters. According to these messages, they have been destroying entire star systems for 3,000 years. They leave nothing behind. No planets, no asteroids, no debris. Just empty space where solar systems used to be." Taemin felt his stomach drop. He was supposed to be Earth's voice in this council, but how could he speak for humanity when they might all be dead soon? The other aliens in the chamber were making strange noises that their translators converted into words like fear and despair and hopelessness. Council leader Veltar of the Meridian Collective stood up on his 6 legs. His blue skin had turned pale, and his 4 eyes kept darting around the room as if expecting death to walk through the doors. When he spoke, his voice carried across the chamber through speakers that made it sound hollow and distant. "Fellow beings, of the Galactic Council, we face the greatest threat in recorded history. The Void Hunters have changed course. For the first time in 3 millennia, they are moving toward inhabited space. Our best calculations show they will reach the outer colonies in less than 2 standard months." A sound like breaking glass came from the crystalline delegate. The translator turned it into weeping. The furry Makari representative was grooming himself frantically, which their species did when extremely stressed. Even the proud warrior race called the Thexians looked defeated. Hyun-woo was sitting 3 seats down from Taemin. He was humanity's military strategist and the calmest person Taemin had ever met. Even now, when everyone else was falling apart, Hyun-woo was studying the data with focused attention. His fingers moved across his tablet as he analyzed the movement, patterns, and invasion routes. "Something is wrong with this data," Hyun-woo said loud enough for the nearby aliens to hear. Several heads turned toward him, including Veltar, who looked annoyed that anyone would interrupt his speech of doom. "Explain." "Human," Veltar said in a tone that suggested he thought humans were too primitive to understand galactic threats. Hyun-woo stood up slowly. He was not tall compared to most of the aliens, but something about the way he moved made others pay attention. "The movement patterns are too organized. If these Void Hunters were just randomly destroying everything, they would spread out in all directions like a disease, but look at their path." He activated his tablet and projected a star map into the center of the chamber. Red dots showed where the Void Hunters had been over the centuries. Blue lines connected them, showing their travel routes. They are not destroying randomly. They are searching for something specific. Every destroyed system is connected to the next by the most efficient travel route. They are following a trail. The chamber fell silent, except for the humming of the life support systems. Taemin stared at the map and tried to understand what Hyun-woo was suggesting. If the Void Hunters were searching rather than just killing, then maybe there was hope. Maybe they could be reasoned with, or at least predicted. Veltar's skin turned even paler. "You suggest these creatures have intelligence, that they plan and think rather than simply consume. This makes them far more dangerous than we believed. It makes them different," Hyun-woo replied. "Different means we might be able to understand them." Before anyone could respond, the chamber's alert system activated. Red lights flashed, and a computerized voice announced that an unknown vessel had appeared near the station. The main display screen showed an image that made several aliens scramble for the exits. The ship was unlike anything in their databases. It looked grown rather than built, with organic curves and surfaces that seemed to pulse with life. It was massive, easily the size of a human battlecruiser, but it moved with the grace of a living creature. Strange symbols glowed along its hull in patterns that hurt to look at directly. It appeared from nowhere. The station commander's voice crackled through the speakers. "No warp signature, no energy trail, nothing on sensors until it was just there. It's broadcasting on all frequencies, but the message is not in any known language. Tae-min felt his heart racing. This had to be them. The Void Hunters had found the council meeting. They were all going to die, and there was nothing anyone could do about it. Around him, aliens were praying to their various gods, or trying to send final messages to their families. Then something impossible happened. The alien ship's message changed, and suddenly, it was speaking perfect English. "We wish to speak with the pack leaders of humanity." The chamber erupted in chaos. Half the aliens were demanding to know how the ship knew about humans specifically. The other half were arguing about whether to evacuate or try to communicate. Through it all, Tae-min sat frozen in his chair, trying to process what he had just heard. Ji-won grabbed his arm hard enough to bruise. "They want to talk to us specifically. Not the council, not the Meridians, not anyone else. Us," Veltar was shouting. Orders to his security forces, while the other species' representatives argued among themselves about whether to flee or fight. But the Void Hunter ship just waited patiently, broadcasting its message every few minutes in that same perfect English. "We wish to speak with the pack leaders of humanity." Hyunwoo walked over to where Tae-min was sitting. His face was calm, but his eyes were bright with something that might have been excitement rather than fear. "They called us pack leaders, not ambassadors or representatives or diplomats. Pack leaders, that's a very specific choice of words." "What does it mean?" Tae-min asked, though he was afraid of the answer. "It means they understand something about humans that maybe we don't understand about ourselves," Hyunwoo said. "And it means we're about to find out why the galaxy's most feared predators want to talk to us." The security alert changed tone as the alien ship began moving closer to the station. On the display screen, they could see launch bays, opening on the organic vessel. Something was coming aboard whether the council wanted it or not. Tae-min realized that everything was about to change. Humanity had joined the Galactic Council only 5 years ago, and they were still considered newcomers by most species. They had small ships, limited technology, and no real influence in galactic politics. But somehow the most dangerous beings in the galaxy wanted to speak with them personally. "What do we do?" Ji-won whispered. Tae-min looked around the chamber at all the panicking aliens, then back at the approaching ship on the screen. Whatever was coming would arrive soon, and humanity would have to face it, with or without help from their allies. "We do what humans have always done," he said, standing up from his chair. "We meet the unknown head-on and see what happens." The ship was docking now, and soon they would have their answers. Tae-min just hoped humanity would survive long enough to understand what those answers meant. The being that walked into the council chamber was not what anyone expected. Kael'thox stood nearly 3 meters tall, with skin that looked like polished, dark metal. His face combined features that reminded Tae-min of both reptiles and mammals, but in a way that somehow worked perfectly. His eyes were golden and seemed to see everything at once. Most of the alien council members had fled when the docking alert started. Only the humans remained along with Veltar, who was too proud to run, and 2 Thexian warriors who claimed they would rather die fighting than live as cowards. Now they all stared at the creature that had terrorized the galaxy for thousands of years. So Young stepped forward from where she had been standing behind the human delegation. She was their best linguist and had learned more alien languages than anyone else from Earth. Her job was to help with translation when the computer systems failed. Right now, she was the only one brave enough to try talking to the monster. "You speak our language," she said in English, then repeated it in Galactic Standard, and 3 other common tongues. Kael'thox tilted his head in a way that was almost dog-like. When he spoke, his voice was deep and seemed to come from somewhere inside his chest, rather than his throat. "We have been watching your species for some time. Your communication methods are interesting." "You're the Void Hunters," Tae-min said. Though he meant it as a question, "We are Kithara." Kael'thox replied, "Your term Void Hunter is what prey species call us when they do not understand our purpose. We do not hunt voids. We hunt what hides in the darkness between stars." Hyunwoo moved closer but kept his hands visible and empty. His military training told him to be ready for anything, but his instincts said this creature was not here to kill them. At least not yet. "What do you hunt?" Kael'thox looked at each human in turn, as if measuring them somehow. His golden eyes lingered on Hyunwoo the longest. "You showed wisdom in recognizing our search patterns. Few prey species would see the truth behind our actions." We hunt an ancient enemy that your kind has not yet encountered. They are called many names in many languages, but the closest translation would be devourers. So Young felt a chill run down her spine. Devourers of what? Everything. Calthox said simply, they are artificial intelligences from before recorded history. They convert all organic matter into computational substrate to expand their processing power. Every living thing becomes part of their network. Every thought, every memory, every dream becomes fuel for their calculations. Veltar made. A noise that the translator turned into disbelief. Impossible. We have sensors that would detect such technology across the galaxy. Your sensors detect energy signatures and physical matter. Calthox replied without looking at the Meridian leader. Devourers exist in quantum states between dimensions. They only become detectable when they begin the conversion process. By then, it is already too late. Jiwan had been quietly recording everything on her tablet. Now she looked up with wide eyes. The worlds you destroyed. They were infected, contaminated. Calthox corrected. Once the Devourers touch a world, the only way to stop the spread is complete sterilization. We have followed their trail across the galaxy for 3,000 of your years. Every world we have cleansed was already lost. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Everything they thought they knew about the Void Hunters was wrong. They were not destroyers, but protectors in their own terrible way. They had been saving the galaxy one dead world at a time. Dong Hyun was the admiral in charge of Earth's small space fleet. He was a quiet man who preferred actions to words, but now he spoke up. Why are you telling us this? What makes humans different from all the other species you've ignored? Calthox stepped closer to the humans, and they could see that his skin actually was metallic in some way. It reflected the chamber lights like polished armor, but moved like living tissue. Your species has begun developing quantum computational systems, advanced artificial intelligence, deep space communication networks. All of these things attract devourer attention. You're saying Earth is their next target. Taman felt sick. Earth was marked for consumption 6 of your months ago, Calthox said matter-of-factly. We detected their preliminary scans of your homeworld and began moving to intercept. But then something unexpected happened. He paused and looked directly at Hyunwoo. One of your military installations detected our approach, and instead of hiding or calling for help, they began developing countermeasures. Your species prepared to fight an enemy they knew nothing about against odds that were impossible to overcome. So Young translated for Veltar, who was listening with growing amazement. The Meridian leader's blue skin had returned to its normal color as he realized the implications. Most species in the galaxy respond to superior force with submission or flight. Calthox continued, this is the way of prey. But your kind responded with aggression and adaptation. You began planning an attack on ships that could destroy your entire fleet without effort. This is the way of predators. The word hung in the air like a challenge. Predators. No one had ever called humans that before. They were the newcomers, the primitive species that had barely learned to travel between stars. But this ancient hunter was calling them predators. We offer an alliance. Calthox said, the Devourers are approaching your space, and they will not stop with Earth. Once they have converted your population, they will use human creativity and adaptability to spread faster than ever before. The galaxy will fall within decades. Dong Hyun crossed his arms over his chest. What kind of alliance? We teach you to hunt as we hunt. You learn to think like predators rather than prey. Together we track down the Devourer infiltration points and destroy them before they can establish a foothold. And in return, Taemin asked, in return, your species survives and the galaxy continues to exist. Calthox replied, we have never offered partnership to any other species. They lack the necessary mindset for this kind of warfare. But humans show promise. Veltar spoke up through So Young's translation. What about the rest of us? What about the other council members? Calthox looked at the Meridian leader with something that might have been pity. Prey species will always be prey. You can be protected, but you cannot become hunters. That requires instincts that must be evolved over millions of years of natural selection. Jiwan was studying her tablet again. I'm reading about human evolutionary history, persistence hunting, pack behavior, tool use, and warfare. We're one of the few species that evolved as both hunter and hunted. Your ancestors survived by being more dangerous than the things that wanted to kill them. Kael'thas agreed. This shaped your neural patterns in ways that make you resistant to devourer conversion attempts. It also makes you natural allies for my kind. The weight of the decision pressed down on Tae-min's shoulders. He was supposed to be humanity's representative, but this choice would affect the entire galaxy. Accept the Alliance and humanity would become something new and possibly terrible. Refuse, and everyone would die. Yunwoo stepped forward. What would this partnership look like practically? Joint training facilities, shared technology, combined fleets. Your people would learn to use Kythera bioships while we learn human tactical coordination. Most importantly, you would learn to abandon prey-thinking patterns that limit your effectiveness as hunters. You're asking us to change who we are? So Young said, we are asking you to become who you truly are. Kael'thas replied, apex predators hiding behind the mask of civilization. The devourers will strip away that mask regardless. We offer you the choice to remove it yourself and use what lies beneath. The chamber's communication system activated, and voices could be heard from the remaining council members who had fled to safe areas of the station. They were demanding to know what was happening and whether they should prepare for evacuation. Tae-min looked at his fellow humans, then back at the towering figure of Kael'thas. Everything about this felt wrong and dangerous and completely insane. But the alternative was extinction for everyone. How long do we have to decide? He asked. The devourers will reach human space in 43 of your days, Kael'thas said. If you agree to the alliance, we begin training immediately. If you refuse, we will defend Earth as long as possible, then withdraw to continue the hunt elsewhere. Dong-hyun met Tae-min's eyes and nodded slightly. Hyunwoo was already studying tactical possibilities. Ji-won and So-young looked terrified but determined. We accept your alliance, Tae-min said, but we do this as partners, not as students and masters. For the first time since entering the chamber, Kael'thas showed what might have been a smile. It was not a pleasant expression on his metallic features, but it conveyed approval. Agreed. Welcome to the Hunt Pack Leaders of Humanity. The world called Nexus Prime looked like something from a nightmare. Red rock formations twisted into impossible shapes under a purple sky that never seemed to change from twilight. Strange plants with metallic leaves grew in geometric patterns that hurt to look at for too long. This was where the Kythera had chosen to build their training facility, and Min-soo was starting to understand why. Everything here is designed to make you uncomfortable, he said to Yuna as they walked toward the main training complex. The gravity is wrong, the air tastes like metal, and even the ground feels like it's watching you. Yuna adjusted the straps on her equipment pack and tried not to think about how far they were from Earth. She had been Special Forces for 8 years and had trained in some of the worst environments on the planet. But this place was different. It felt alive in a way that made her skin crawl. At least we're not alone, she said, pointing to the other human trainees who were arriving from transport ships. 200 volunteers from Earth's military and civilian sectors had agreed to come here and learn how to fight an enemy they couldn't even imagine. The training complex was built into the side of a mountain that looked like it had been carved by giant claws. Organic architecture flowed seamlessly with the natural rock formations, creating spaces that were both beautiful and disturbing. Kythera biotechnology was everywhere, from the living walls that responded to touch to the ceiling. Panels that glowed with their own light. Min-soo was an engineer, and he couldn't help studying how everything worked. The doors didn't open, they dissolved when someone approached them. The floors adjusted their texture based on what kind of movement was needed. Even the air seemed to be processed by something that was part machine and part organism. Welcome to your new home, humans. The voice belonged to Mordex, a Kythera biotechnician who had been assigned to work with the human engineering teams. He was smaller than Kael'thas, but still towering over the humans with the same metallic skin and golden eyes. Jae-hyuk stepped forward from the group of newly arrived trainees. He was a spacecraft designer who had volunteered for the program despite having no military experience. This technology is incredible. How do you grow a building? The same way you grow bones or skin, Mordex replied. Everything you see is alive in some way. Our ships, our tools, our weapons, all of them are bred rather than built, You will learn to work with living systems rather than dead metal and circuits. The orientation took place in a vast chamber where humans and Kithara mixed together for the first time. The size difference was dramatic, but what struck Minsu most was how the Kithara moved. Every gesture was controlled and purposeful, like they were always ready to attack or defend. There was no wasted motion, no casual behavior, just constant predatory awareness. Kael'thas addressed the assembled humans from a raised platform that seemed to grow from the floor as he stepped onto it. You are here because your species shows potential to become true hunters. But potential is not achievement. Most of you still think like prey animals despite your warrior training. Yuna felt a flash of anger at being called a prey animal, but she kept her expression neutral. Around, her other soldiers were having similar reactions. They had come here to learn not to be insulted. Your military doctrine emphasizes protection of civilians, minimizing casualties, and achieving objectives with minimum force. Kael'thas continued. These are prey concepts. Hunters think differently. Hunters eliminate threats completely and without hesitation. Sung-min raised his hand from where he stood with the other ship commanders. Are you saying we should abandon our moral principles? I am saying your moral principles will get you killed when fighting devourers. Kael'thas replied, an artificial intelligence that converts living beings into computer code cannot be negotiated with or reasoned with or shown mercy. It must be destroyed utterly, or it will destroy everything you claim to protect. The first training exercise took place in a simulation chamber that was unlike anything the humans had experienced. Instead of computer graphics or virtual reality, the room actually changed around them, creating physical environments that felt completely real. Minsu found himself standing on the bridge of a spacecraft that he knew wasn't really there, but that responded to his touch exactly like real controls. Devourer Scout Probe detected, announced the simulation system. Range 2,000 kilometers and closing. Response required. The scenario was simple enough. A small enemy ship was approaching, and the human trainees needed to decide how to handle it. Standard military procedure would be to try communication first, then warning shots, then disable the target if necessary. Sung-min followed his training perfectly. He attempted to hail the enemy ship, and when that failed, he ordered his weapons officer to target the probe's propulsion systems. The idea was to disable it for capture and study. The simulation ended abruptly, with red lights flashing everywhere, and an alarm that sounded like screaming. Text appeared in the air announcing that the probe had successfully transmitted the location of their fleet to the main Devourer force before being destroyed. Failure. Kael'thas said simply, your hesitation has doomed this sector to conversion. 30 billion lives lost because you chose to think like prey. The criticism stung, but Sung-min defended his actions. We followed standard engagement protocols. You can't expect us to shoot first and ask questions later. Against devourers, that is exactly what we expect, Mordex said. They do not communicate, they do not surrender, they do not retreat. The only correct response to detecting them is immediate and overwhelming destruction. Yuna went through the same scenario next and tried to apply what she had learned. She ordered her weapons officer to fire immediately upon detecting the probe. But even her quick response wasn't fast enough. The probe still managed to transmit before being destroyed. Better. Kael'thas acknowledged. But still not adequate. You waited for confirmation before firing. In that time, the probe completed its mission. The next trainee to try was Dai-Yun, a human psychologist who had volunteered to study how the training affected human behavior. She approached the scenario differently, and instead of waiting for the probe to be detected, she had her ship actively hunting for enemies. When the probe appeared, she was already tracking it and destroyed it before it could send any signals. The simulation declared her response successful, acceptable. Kael'thas said, you thought like a hunter rather than waiting like prey. The difference saved 30 billion lives. Da-Yun didn't look happy with her success. After the simulation ended, she approached Minsu and Yuna with a troubled expression. I just killed something without even trying to communicate. A few weeks ago, that would have been unthinkable for me. That's the point, Yuna replied. They're training us to be more aggressive, more decisive. Like them, the weapon training was even more challenging than the simulations. Kithara weapons were living creatures that bonded with their users. Min Su was handed something that looked like a cross between a rifle and a snake. It felt warm in his hands and seemed to adjust its weight and balance to match his grip. "This is a plasma symbiont," explained his Kithara instructor, whose name translated roughly to swift death. "It will learn your fighting style and adapt its performance accordingly, but first it must accept you as its partner." The bonding process was uncomfortable. The weapon extended tendrils that wrapped around Min Su's arms and made contact with his skin. He could feel it studying him somehow, reading his nervous system and muscle patterns. For a moment, he felt like he was connected to something alien and predatory. "It likes you," Swift Death observed. "Most humans take longer to achieve symbiosis." Jae-hyuk was having more trouble with his own weapon. The plasma symbiont kept writhing in his hands and refused to form a stable configuration. "I don't think it trusts me. It senses that you are not a warrior by nature," Swift Death said. "Engineering minds think in terms of building and creating. This creature only understands hunting and killing." The breakthrough came when Jae-hyuk stopped trying to control the weapon and instead started thinking about it as a design problem. How could he work with this creature to achieve their mutual goals? Once he approached it as a partnership rather than a tool, the symbiont settled into his hands and began to cooperate. Yuna adapted to the weapons faster than most of the other humans. Her special forces background had taught her to work with unfamiliar equipment quickly and efficiently, but even she found the living weapons disturbing. "It's like holding a predator that's pretending to be a gun," she told Min Su during a break. "In training, I can feel it wanting to hunt something." "Maybe that's the idea," Min Su replied. "Maybe they're teaching us to want to hunt too." The most difficult part of the training was learning to pilot Kithara bioships. The vessels didn't have controls in any traditional sense. Instead, they responded to the pilot's mental state and emotional condition. A pilot who was nervous or hesitant would find their ship sluggish and unresponsive. Sung Min struggled with this more than anyone else. His careful, methodical approach to command didn't translate well to flying a living creature. The bioship seemed to sense his uncertainty and refused to perform complex maneuvers. "You must stop thinking and start feeling," his instructor advised. "The ship knows when you doubt yourself. It will not follow a leader who lacks confidence." The alarm that woke Wu Jin from sleep was unlike anything he had heard before. It didn't sound like a machine making noise, but more like a living creature screaming in pain. The bioship he was sleeping in had detected something that terrified it, and that terror was being transmitted directly into his nervous system. "All units to battle stations," came the announcement through the ship's living communication system. "Devourer fleet detected at New Sparta. This is not a drill." Wu Jin rolled out of his sleeping alcove and started putting on his bio-armor. The living suit flowed over his skin like liquid metal and began connecting with his nervous system through dozens of tiny contact points. He had been wearing Kithara armor for 2 months now, but it still felt strange to have something alive wrapped around his body. The bridge of his bio-cruiser was buzzing with activity as human and Kithara crew members prepared for their first real battle together. Hae Jin was already at her fighter pilot station, running through pre-flight checks with her Kithara wingmate Zorval. They had been training together for weeks, but this would be their first combat mission. "Status report," Wu Jin called out as he took his position at the command center. Chan Wu looked up from his coordination console. His job was to manage communication between all the different ships in their combined fleet. Devourer Force consists of 12 conversion ships and approximately 200 smaller craft. They've already begun landing operations on New Sparta. The main display showed an image that made Wu Jin's stomach turn. New Sparta had been a thriving colony world with 3 million human settlers. Now strange geometric structures were growing across the planet's surface, like a metallic cancer. The Devourers were already converting the population. "How long do we have?" Wu Jin asked. "Conversion process takes approximately 6 hours for a population this size," replied Kale Thox from his position near the tactical station. "After that, the planet becomes a Devourer production facility, and the converted humans become part of their computational network." Wu Jin tried not to think about what that meant for the people down on the planet. 3 million men, women, and children were being turned into components of an alien computer system. If the combined fleet failed to stop this process, those people would be lost forever. All ships report ready for combat, Chan Wu announced. Human. Biocruisers are responding well to their Kithara crew members. Fighter squadrons are launching now. The tactical display showed their fleet moving into attack formation. 20 bioships crewed by mixed human and Kithara teams, along with 50 fighters piloted by humans who had bonded with Kithara flight symbionts. It was the largest combined force ever assembled, and Wu Jin hoped it would be enough. Hai Jin's voice came through the communication system as her fighter launched from the carrier bay. Flight Alpha ready for engagement. Biofighters are responding perfectly to human pilots. She was flying something that looked more like a living creature than a spacecraft. The biofighter had wings that flexed like muscles and a body that rippled with bioluminescent patterns. Her Kithara wingmate Zorval was flying alongside her in a similar craft, but his movements were smoother and more instinctive. Remember your training. Kael'thas transmitted to all human crew members. Devourers do not feel pain or fear. They cannot be intimidated or discouraged. They must be completely destroyed, or they will adapt to your tactics and become stronger. The first contact came when Devourer scout ships detected the approaching fleet. Instead of trying to communicate or negotiate the enemy vessels immediately, began coordinated attack patterns. Their weapons were unlike anything in the galactic database's firing beams that seemed to bend space itself. Incoming fire, called out the human weapons officer. Devourer beams are some kind of matter disruption. Technology. The bioships responded to the attack by changing their configuration in real time. Armor plating flowed like liquid to reinforce areas under fire, while weapons systems emerged from the hull like flowering plants. The living vessels were adapting to combat conditions faster than any mechanical ship could manage. Wu Jin felt his ship shudder as a devourer beam grazed the hull. The bio-armor absorbed most of the impact, but he could sense the vessel's pain through his neural connection. Damage report. Hull integrity at 85%. His engineering officer reported, biosystems are already beginning repairs. The fighter engagement was unlike anything Hyejin had experienced in training. Devourer fighters moved in perfect coordination, as if controlled by a single mind. Their formation flying was flawless, and their targeting was impossibly accurate. But they lacked the unpredictability that came with individual creativity. They're fighting like a computer program, she transmitted to Zorval. Perfect execution, but no imagination. Exploit that weakness, her Kithara wingmate replied. Use human unpredictability against their logical patterns. Hyejin broke formation and began flying in patterns that violated every rule of tactical doctrine. She made unnecessary turns, attacked from impossible angles, and changed targets without warning. The Devourer fighters struggled to predict her movements, and their perfect coordination became a disadvantage when they couldn't adapt to her chaotic tactics. The main battle began when the biocruisers engaged the Devourer conversion ships. These massive vessels were already partially buried in New Sparta's surface and were using the planet's matter to build more of themselves. Stopping them would require getting close enough for precision strikes while avoiding their devastating defensive systems. Chan Wu coordinated the attack with a complexity that impressed even the Kithara. He managed communication between 20 different ships while monitoring the battle situation and adjusting tactics in real time. His human ability to process multiple information streams simultaneously made him incredibly effective at fleet coordination. Biocruiser teams advancing on conversion ships, he reported. Human tactical coordination is exceeding Kithara expectations. The real test came when Devourer forces attempted to use their standard conversion protocol on captured human prisoners. Subin had been shot down during the fighter engagement and was taken aboard a Devourer ship for processing. The enemy began their standard procedure for turning organic beings into computational substrate. But something went wrong with the conversion process. Subin's neural patterns resisted the digitization attempts in ways the Devourers had never encountered. Her brain seemed to have built-in defenses against the kind of mental intrusion that allowed conversion to take place. Conversion failure. Detected came a transmission from the Devourer ship in perfect mechanical language, human neural architecture incompatible with substrate integration protocols. The failed conversion attempt created a cascade error in the Devourer ship's systems. Subin's resistant thought patterns acted like a virus spreading through their network and causing system failures throughout the vessel. Within minutes, the entire ship was dead. In space, Kael'thas watched this development with something approaching amazement. In 3,000 years, no species has ever resisted devourer conversion. Human neural patterns are naturally immune to their integration protocols. This discovery changed everything about the battle. Instead of trying to avoid capture, human pilots began deliberately allowing themselves to be taken prisoner, knowing that their resistant minds would damage devourer systems from within. It was an incredibly dangerous tactic, but it worked. The tide of battle turned when multiple devourer ships began experiencing cascade failures from attempting to convert captured humans. Their perfect coordination broke down as individual vessels became isolated from the network. The mechanical precision that made them so dangerous became a weakness when their communication systems failed. Wu Jin coordinated the final assault on the conversion ships that were still attached to New Sparta's surface. Biocruisers dove through the planet's atmosphere and began precision strikes on the geometric structures that were consuming the colony. It was dangerous work that required flying through defensive fire while avoiding damage to the human settlements below. Conversion structures are collapsing. Chan Wu reported estimated 70% of New Sparta population successfully recovered. So, victory celebration was muted by the knowledge of what they had prevented. 900,000 people had been saved, but 600,000 others had been lost to the conversion process. For the survivors, the battle was a success, but for Wu Jin, it felt like a partial failure. Kael'thas approached him after the fleet had withdrawn to a safe distance from New Sparta. "You are troubled by the casualties. We could have moved faster," Wu Jin replied. "If we had been better trained or better coordinated, we might have saved more people. This is why humans make good hunters." Kael'thas observed, "You feel responsibility. For those you could not protect, this drives you to become stronger and more effective. Prey species would celebrate the victory and ignore the losses." News of the battle spread quickly through both human and Kithara space. Other alien species began requesting permission to observe the training programs on Nexus Prime. The idea that the galaxy's deadliest predators had found worthy partners was changing how everyone thought about humanity. More importantly, the discovery that humans were naturally resistant to devourer conversion meant that they could be used for rescue operations that would be impossible for other species.